Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 374 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we are going to start launching rockets, as well as upgrade our blue science. Enjoy! Work on the rocket silos is continuing. We're just about done with the final stage on most of those. Just gotta let it do its thing. Still haven't quite gotten all these labs placed. We're just heavily limited on certain resources right now because the silos are taking them all up. So we just kind of have to let it do its thing. But good news is that we're just about done with Faster Than Light Theory B, which means we're about to do C, which is even more research, but it adds the blue science in there. So that's something we need to calculate now. And we previously went with 75 items a second, so we'll do the same here. So the input resource is laser arrays on one side and atomic sensor arrays on the other. But instead of making it phallically shaped, which is logistically easy and makes sense by doing input on one side, input on the other, and then piping him in through the top, it's not very space efficient, so it'd be a lot better if we can do both elements on one side. And we have to start somewhere, so let's do the easy one. There's a great deal of direct insertion going on here. So we can do something like this. It looks like it's two going into one, but these machines in the middle will be shared between different setups. So first thing we need to do is copy this one more time, because we need to get the repeatable pattern in here, because it would look something like that. Based on the numbers we're looking at here, we might have to do two of them side by side, because that gets us 6 machines, and we're going to need to have 7 of them. So we can pull off this last one. Then we're going to need to flip the sides, and it all still looks matched, so we'll put it down there. As a quick check, the limiting factor is the copper, so we should have at least 14 copper shoppers in this if we did it right. And there's 8 on the top and 8 on the bottom, which means that we do have a setup here that works. So that's a reasonable size for this. That's about as narrow as we could make it. Like, when you really think about it, that's a lot of production there. 264 copper plates, 110 aluminum plates, 44 silver plates, and 22 white circuits. That's a lot of stuff going into this area. Hey, looks like one of the warehouses emptied. We're getting close now. Down to 185,000 sand. And that's basically what it's using. And that's because we made a glass request. It is kind of annoying that we're going to have to rebuild this. Rebuilding it was already in the cards because of the changes to coolant here. So we're going to have to create something that's going to put out 264 glass, and I'm not even sure how we would do that. That's a problem for another day. Right now, we just want to get science researching again. And in fact, we probably could do that now that I think about it. We'll use the existing belt that's here. And let's toss them in a provider chest. And how about 2,000 of them? Well, there they go. Now they're starting to grab them. And they will slowly populate these labs. At least so we're making some progress. It just feels kind of bad to make none at all. So we're just about through all of the random junk that we got as a result of making all these. And I think that's it. Because now it can be copied. And it looks like, because the requirements are so low on the silver and aluminum plates, we can actually just copy those on top of each other. So it would be like that. And it's a lot happening, but that looks correct. This gives us, ultimately, our limiting factor is copper plate machines. We have 4 of them. So we would need to build 4 more of these, either in a row or on top of each other like this. But they would combine like that. Our bots are so fast, especially when we have lots of them. But it would be like this. This is as big as it can be, because one of these glass belts can only support 4 groups like this. And it's already going through 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's as big as it can be. The only other thing that can happen to it is it needs to be copied down because of our belt limitations. It's going to be substantial. Also, one thing I noticed here is that we have used up all of that calcium chloride that was sitting in here from tungsten. So that's nice. We no longer need this belt delivering resources. They just operate normally now. It also means we don't need to be delivering that signal. I'm kind of starting to regret not just doing this the easy way with bots. But too late now. We're in this to see it completed. Okay, we would need to have 2 of these doing their input, and 2 plate choppers as well. Plates would have to come from somewhere. Also, the input oils will need to come in, and ultimately all of this would need to have their belts supplied from somewhere. So actually getting this integrated, it's probably going to take a lot of work, so I'll do that off camera. But before we get to that point, all these rockets might be complete. So I will come back with whatever is done first. Okay, I'm back. Both the rocket silos and this setup seem to have been completed right around the same time. It's essentially more or less the same as it was when we planned it. I just had to kind of get everything attached here. So it's kind of an unholy mixture of things coming from the bus in coil form and things being delivered by drone. It doesn't require steel by drone and it doesn't require aluminum by drone, but it fits in well with the other resources. So those are just being delivered in that way. And we're making use of the naphtha, the fuel oil, and the nitrogen from the other setup. And we won't really be able to performance test this until it's all connected. So we have 8 laser arrays. And although it works here, the design is based around having 16 of the copper plate machines, of which there is 1 for each laser array. So what that means is that we're going to need a second one of these. And we'll just essentially select everything. And then this needs to be combined. So I think I'll just side load it on the belt. And in fact, if we do it that way on both sides, it will be balanced. We don't need that steel there because we have 1 more connected, and I suppose at this point I can unhook things because we can hook them up after it's all here and find out how it works. Alright, that's probably going to take a little while for drones to get everything here. We probably need way more drones than this. But at the same time, I don't want to delay it because we need it for research. But all the rocket silos are ready to go. Well, first things first. Maximum productivity. And each one is going to get a couple of belts. The actual input of all of these is very low. So input, long-handed, and the extra long-handed. And that's it. That'll get the necessary 5 inputs, but also we need to give it some cargo. And of course we want it to auto-launch if it gets it, because they're going to launch constantly. And now we need to create some logic for which items it decides to launch with, because we need to launch a lot of different stuff here. Well, we can do some requester chests here. And how about we go from the top, and we need to put in all of the different things that might be launched. So one of them is a satellite, and we'll just request 1, and of course it will be delivered. And if we go to intermediate products, we have all of the components that we might potentially need to launch. And we can use a SpaceX combinator here that will tell us, if we place it, exactly what we need to launch for this phase. So now we'll turn the SpaceX menu on, and we might as well do this too, which is the rocket target mod. And all it does is tell you how many rockets you've launched. And I felt like that would be pretty useful since we're going to be launching a lot of rockets, that you can just look at this number here to see how many we're up to. Whereas this will tell you how far along we are with SpaceX. So what we want to do is put in components based on whether or not they're needed. So we'll start with the first one, and I guess we'll remove these other chests for now, that it is requesting 1 satellite, and it is available. So we'll put an inserter there, and how about let's move this combinator. Doesn't seem like the direction matters, but we'll connect it by a wire, and the way that it works is if the satellite condition is greater than 0, so we need at least 1, it's allowed to swing and load the rocket with that component. So now we need to give every silo its own supply. And this is going to be a pretty good test of the factory. It's actually been fairly dormant right now, since our science research has dramatically reduced. Now that we have way too many labs for the amount of science that we're making. Of course, that will change once we get all this set up. And it's getting there. No glass, huh? I mean, it's going, but horrendously slow. no sodium hydroxide. Because we're not electrolyzing salt. No sodium, because no electrodes, because mineralized water is maxed out. And it's probably connected just fine. I'm guessing because our factory's been kind of dormant, yeah, it just cannot use it up. So the factory's in a weird spot right now. Probably the easiest way to handle this is just with a really fast clarifier. And I kind of just want to make it by hand so it'll be placed quickly so we can check this to see if it works. Okay. We certainly want to be using up all this salt if we can. And I guess we could pump this up a little faster. It's still not a lot though, but at least it's going now. At some point we are going to need to dramatically increase our sodium hydroxide output. And it does need 26 in the end, which is actually a lot. Well, we could put faster speed modules in here, but it kind of doesn't matter because this belt is going at full blast. Although we can cheat a little bit by directly inserting. We'll just give it the same requirement for these. And then remove those, so we're constantly doing little fixes to just get more and more out of this thing. But at some point we are going to hit the limit. But that is hopefully enough here. Fortunately, sodium hydroxide is short on all ends because we are using it to build more accumulators, which looks like the next round has been completed. So now we're up to 2.1 terajoules, and it will continue. I really want to test this, but until we actually get seeded with all the necessary materials, there's kind of no point. Now it's time to get the resources in for the silos. Let's double check that red belts for all of this will work. Yep, just fine. Okay, it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it should work fine. Very rapid placement. That's everything we need. So let's hook everything up and see how it works. Unfortunately, it won't really be 2 rockets a minute in the sense where there's a rocket launch every 30 seconds. It's going to be there's 20 rockets every 10 minutes because we're starting them all at the same time. I could try to stagger them, but something tells me they would just kind of align themselves again anyway whenever there was a slowdown. So let's just hook them up and see how it works. So they're pulling in rocket parts, and it begins one step at a time. But it's actually reasonably fast for what it is. And the items made it to the back now, which is good because I would hope that they would. This doesn't actually stress our logistics very much. It's just these are very expensive items to make. As much power as these use, the rocket silos are nowhere close to the top of the list. They're like at number 10 at about 70 megawatts. Seems like something's a little wrong about that though, because we have 20 silos and it says it's about 70 megawatts, but each one of these silos says that it's using 55 on its own. So I'm not sure about that, but at the same time I don't want to ask any questions. Of course we have some satellites in our inventory, we definitely don't want those. And I kind of want to watch it because when these go, they're pretty much all going to launch at the same time, which will probably be pretty interesting to see. The likelihood that it's going to be the thumbnail of the video seems very high. And lots of requests. Immediately requesting that rocket fuel. But the setup seems broken, so that's not good. What broke about this? No tungsten. Oh. We're just pulling it out of here, and in the process of changing this, we just ripped it out and never put it back. So there might be a little hiccup with the fuel. But it'll catch up. And it does look like the rest of the materials got here. So, you can see what it's like when everything's hooked up. It all zooms through there. And these ones need to be connected as well. Depots are empty. Glass is a difficult thing to ship because of how much bigger it is than coils. And also plates in general. So we're going to have to do some major upgrades to a lot of things to get this to run at full speed. But it's filling up on items, so it works. We just won't be able to test it in earnest for some time, whenever those factory upgrades are in place. almost ready. These silos on the bottom still have their materials, so they'll be able to launch without issue. Fantastic. Of course, this one's about done. It's a lot of rockets in a short period of time. Well, I think that's it for now. But now another thing we need to do is get all these space science packs out of here. And we definitely want them to be gone the second they can be. Let's do it as far away from everything else as possible so there won't be any issues. And I'm guessing the single inserter is actually going to be fine for this. Why is that one in a slightly different spot? It's so quiet now after all that noise. We are going to need to keep track of all this space science. But for now, let's just toss it somewhere. And in fact, they're actually all being placed into the various buffers. So there they are. But we are going to need some places to store them, especially if we might potentially have up to 2 million of them on hand. So for now, how about we do a storage warehouse and just kind of put it like right there for the space science. Well, here we go. It looks like the other half of the rockets are going to launch now. I suppose I'll watch this too. It is very cinematic. No, don't autosave here. Well, there's the first 20. Rocket fuel is seemingly relatively stable now. It's not going to fully compress these belts, which is fine, but it also had a big buffer to go through, so it's probably going to take a little while. There's going to be some growing pains here, but it's time for more accumulators and more concrete. So all we have to do is keep putting more accumulators in. And they do actually fit in here, luckily enough, without anything being messed up. And unknowingly, they are grabbing the refined concrete from here. So to stop them from doing that, I kind of want to just replace these chests, just to make that not available. And then if we want to build more silos, we can change those around again, because they really shouldn't be going across the factory to get their concrete. Okay, well, those launches will continue to happen. We will have to check on it from time to time to see what the limiting factor is. But for now, we have to keep working on this, and still no glass. Would have expected to have it by now. It's that sodium hydroxide, which is going everywhere in its defense, just not very fast. And it's a bit of an optical illusion, but those are not going backwards. There we go. That shows you. 40 drones grabbing salt. So the salt is being used, and we are making the sodium hydroxide. It's just going places. Certainly accumulators use a bunch of it. So I think for now we'll have to let it go. When the factory's this big, it creates enormous buffers that take quite a long time to fill up, especially when we're making accumulators. But I would say once the factory's salt has been completely cleared out, then maybe it's time to upgrade this setup. But as long as there's a ton of salt all over the place, then this is still doing its job, and it's technically using it up faster than we could even get it here. And looks like more rockets launched. Quietly this time, but they did. Well, we won't be able to test this setup without its glass. Well, let's theory craft here. So if we wanted to make a huge amount of sodium hydroxide, how would we do it? Well, it can come from the solution itself, which could come from sodium carbonate, which is interesting. It would probably be a huge setup, but we could do something like this, creating the sodium carbonate, and then we would electrolyze that, which unfortunately would be a normal process with electrodes. But in the end, it would give us the sodium hydroxide without really putting a lot of effort into it. Like, it certainly wouldn't create a lot of extra chlorine. Just the question is, how big would the setup be? But it would use saline water, which our factory tends to always have. I mean, we can speed them up to some extent, but man, this would be huge. But it would also consume a ton of pollution, so it's probably worth it. If we did it with the algae, it would require 3,750. So let's do another one, which would be electrolyzing it from the water. If we wanted 75, it would require 7,500. So it's half if we do it by growing it from algae. So that probably makes sense. We'll definitely want the speed modules to make this smaller, and we're going to have to find somewhere to put it. Although that said, we could do something a little interesting, and instead of having a central setup that's delivering all this sodium hydroxide everywhere, we could instead attempt to make it nearby where it's being used. And this setup actually makes its own sodium hydroxide, so we wouldn't have to worry about that. But before we start on any other projects, I would really like to see Blue Science start up, even though it's really not going to be able to put out very much. At least it'll run for a while. And the rockets are getting their stuff. We already got 42 of them, so we're making quick progress there. But the other element of our setup for making Blue Science are these atomic sensor arrays, and both of them can be put on one belt just fine. It's a lot smaller than the other side. And let's line it up. Probably need to change the direction of some of these belts, but how about we give it 2 spaces for safety? And put it in there. Oh, I saw a shadow from a rocket. So the last element of this is to take both of those sides and combine them in an extremely large setup. And functionally, it is extremely similar to other things we've already done. So for now, it's going to be no bigger than this. So how about we select this and just put a bunch of them next to each other and see how big it ends up being. Well, that's 192, which is not close. We need more. So all of this together, still not enough. 336, but that's too many. We can get rid of the last row here. And that'll basically do it. We'll need to belt the items in, but that's easy enough to do. It's nice when we've already done stuff, and it's a lot easier. So here we go. Another giant setup. More trees that need to move. And we'll give it 2 spaces for safety. Right there. Definitely gonna have to move this road soon. 20.8 gigawatts, but at least some of that's going into the accumulator. That's just the fact that we have 2 whole sets of thorium reactors going now. And actually, the curium is starting to run out, finally, down to 74 pieces, so once that happens, it's essentially going to get back down to plutonium. And we might have to build more reactors, because this many is perhaps not enough, and then we'll go from there. Okay, looks like the aluminum finally got here. So let's hook it up and see how this works. It's working, but they're shooting them all on the same side. Which, although is fine, it's kind of weird. So let's put a stop to that. And there we go. We just need to get these modules in here. But it's probably going to take a little while. So how about we unhook that, so at least we can test all of them that have been fully equipped with their modules. This is going to require a faster belt for this. Man, so many requests. It's kind of hard to follow it, but I think we're fine. It doesn't necessarily need to operate in real time, just as long as eventually they're good. And one reason why trains aren't picking things up is because they will only pick up if there is a minimum amount of resource. Oh yeah, we need to switch this to the correct science pack. So part of this is the station is getting filled up, but it's not quite high enough to make the request, which is fine. Well, blue science is coming out of some of these. And there it is. Let's take up a new slot. So there we go. Lots of blue science now. It'll probably only run for a little while. But while it is, we might as well hook this in, just like the other 2 science packs. So we'll just come in here and pick a lane, doesn't matter. It'll all get distributed the same, but I kind of want to wait before hooking it in, just to see everything go at the same time. But what this means is now we get to make a huge mess and pull out the old setup. Eventually we'll be able to use this space for something. But for now, it's going to be a mess. And this is so closely intertwined with everything else that's happening here. We want to be careful to leave it in place. So I don't think it's going to require any of this sulfur anymore. But I'm sure I picked up something I shouldn't have in this. We'll find out when something is broken. Although, what this means is a lot of these belts now are probably unnecessary because the one thing they were going into is gone now. The blue packs are zooming by. And we don't need this sodium hydroxide because that was something that was changed. So there's actually a lot of it just sitting there, which will be nice to use up. It's pretty satisfying to clean all this up. Okay. I think that gets most of the requests out, and now we can follow these belts back to find out if that was the last thing that was needed. And with glass, that was certainly the case. So this slot is now available. And I guess probably just pick up the warehouse. But for now, we need to remove the glass request, so it won't send any more. And it also looks like silver is stopping here. And I've already requested the silver coils, so I know that we won't need this anymore. So we put our temporary choppers here, but the entire bus needs to be in coil form now. So we'll get rid of that. And probably make that not a logistics warehouse. Okay then. Who knows how long we'll be able to put these out. But for now we'll hook it up, and robots will just pick locations to send them to. does mean that we no longer need this. So, is this even running anymore? No, not really. I mean, it's trying. It's just hopelessly short of glass. But this glass is being delivered back here, so it'll eventually go. And how is sodium hydroxide? It's actually starting to fill up the warehouse now, so that's good news. And we're almost out of salt. In fact, we're actually adding more from our salt generator. Alright, well, we ran out of the blue science, but it's getting researched. 27 gigawatts, no big deal. But from here, it seems like the next biggest limiting factor here is our glass. So if we're going to get anywhere close to our 75 blue science a second, we're going to need to quadruple the amount of glass we're making. But that's going to have to wait until the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.